Thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. And here's your host, Chris Cebollero.
Well, once again, it's time for the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I got to tell you, everybody out there, I truly appreciate every time you come and join us. And I got to tell you, anytime we get to share some of our leadership expertise, it really is an honor. So thank you very much for, again, tuning into the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. You know, one of the things that we've got to think about is as we start to grow our career and as we start to move forward, we really got to think about the principles of how we can accelerate our performance. When we think about coming into the workforce, I think we have a set of skills. I think we have a bit of knowledge. I think we have some experience. And then what we've got to do is we've now got to start to polish that stuff. And we've now got to grow those things so we can accelerate our performance and really drive impact. I mean, how do we get our brand recognized? How is it that we become the experts in the field? And when we think about growing to the next level, we've really got to put ourselves in a position that we can accelerate our performance. And what's the best way to do that? I got to tell you, I think we've got a really great guest today who's really going to kind of give us some of those tips on accelerating performance and driving our impact. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guest, Eddie Turner. Eddie is a specialist and a deep generalist. He is a certified information technology expert who leverages his digital competence as a leadership development practitioner. He's a change agent who's worked with several of the world's most admired companies. Eddie is a professional speaker who's appeared on CNN Live and has spoken internationally. He is certified as an executive coach, trainer, and facilitator. He is a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, a global workshop and program facilitator for the Association for Talent Development and for Harvard Business School Publishing. He has studied at Harvard and Northwestern University. Eddie works with leaders to accelerate performance and drive impact. Eddie, I want to thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast.
Hello, Chris. Thank you so much for having me as a guest on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast.
Thank you. It's good that you
get an honor.
Yeah, it's great to get the name in there again, Eddie. So I appreciate that. But you know, one of the things, Eddie, when we think about this, and I was really excited when we started to talk about this topic of accelerating performance. And when we think about it, I don't know that we put much effort into us growing and accelerating it and really driving impact. So I guess the first question I want to ask you is, what does it mean to accelerate performance and drive impact?
Thank you for asking that question, Chris. Literally, when I started my new business and I started to think about my unique value proposition, what would I offer to the market? I started to think about three areas that I wanted to focus on. At the end of the day, I tell people, I help people. That's what I do. But very specifically, I work with leaders to accelerate performance and drive impact. In other words, whether a person is a senior leader, an executive, or an aspiring leader or executive, at a point in our career, we all recognize that we need to press the button to accelerate. Sometimes we've become stagnant, or at times we just recognize that the pace of business is just changing at lightning speed. As a result, we need to be able to keep up. And to accelerate that performance, there are certain mechanisms in place that we can use. And the service that I offer to clients allows them to do that. And at the end of the day, because of the increased performance, they are able to drive impact in their organizations, in their lives, in their careers.
You know, I think that one of the things that you touched on there that I really don't want to gloss over now, because I think that there's a lot of people out there that may be in this position, Eddie. And you said that, they become stagnant, but they're really kind of looking for the next best thing. I guess the first thing I ask you is, before you can accelerate performance, you need to recognize that maybe you're in a place of, complacency, or maybe you're in a place of being stagnant. I mean, how do you recognize that to say, you know what, I'm in a place I don't want to be. I got to bust out of it. And what's the best way to do that?
Wow, that's a great question, Chris. You're right. There typically is an event that triggers this awareness. It's not often, for example, this probably has never happened to you, Chris, but this happens to me from time to time. I'm walking around and I've got a piece of food stuck between my teeth and I don't see it. Somebody else sees it and points it out to me. And that's the way it is with perhaps our flaws or foibles that are preventing us from getting to the next step in our career. Someone else recognizes, hey, you've got this particular glaring area that you might want to give attention to. It's impeding your progress. You have not made it to the next project team. You've not made it to the next career level as a leader because of this. So someone has pointed it out typically. Then there are other cases where individuals are just, they have a high level of what we call emotional intelligence, EQ. And they realize on their own, something just doesn't feel right. I need help.
As soon as you said that, I really had to kind of check the mirror to look at my teeth because he really kind of gave me a little bit of a complex there. But certainly that has happened to me. But, so I think that's a really great point that you bring up there. But, there are a lot of times that people may have that self-confidence issue, that self-esteem issue to say, well, maybe I've gotten as far as I can. And I really kind of like how you said that, use those outside influences. Maybe this is really the good place for a mentor as well. And certainly when you think about the work that you do as an executive coach, as a trainer, as a facilitator, this is kind of really your line about that. So if folks are really looking to engage with you to accelerate performance, how do you now take them through the process to say, let's go ahead and get you on that next level?
So this is typically when I receive a phone call from someone. I had a gentleman, for example, the other day, senior finance executive. He reached out to me and he basically explained something very similar to what I said to you. He's taken on this new role. And in this new role, he is realizing, because of some of the feedback he's received from his employees and some of the other folks around him, that he needs help. He wants to be able to make some changes and get to certain goals in his role, but also he's looking at what's next. And so he reached out to me to help him identify more clearly steps he can take, but also in some ways, verification of what's already been presented to him. So one of the things I'll always do is sit down with the client and ask them, what makes you say you need help in a specific area if they've identified it? There's other times I've been called that they have not identified it and they're being coached. Someone else is saying they need it. But in his case, so I asked for those things. And so that's when he delineated the things that he was told. And so I'll look at those things and I'll, if possible, go on site, sit and observe during meetings. I'll issue an assessment. There's different assessments we use in the coaching industry. And those assessments, typically most folks are familiar with something called a 360, where you take a full circle review of the people in that individual's sphere of influence in their life and get that feedback. And that feedback also provides a nice foundation to start a coaching engagement.
Right.
So it's not just what is this individual seeing or not seeing, but what are other people seeing and say, and let's take that, let's use that anecdotal or in some cases empirical evidence and move forward with a solid program to get the individual on the road to the next version of themselves.
And I think that's one of the things that, people don't really spend a lot of time on, So I'm going to ask you this question as I kind of set this up with you is, it's great that this business executive called you to say, I may need a little bit guidance here. But one of the things that I see when I go into organizations, and you probably see it as well, is that there's a big misconception that I don't need to grow anymore. I'm at the director level. I'm at the vice president level. I'm at the management level. What's gotten me here is something that's going to be able to carry me through to the next level. And I'd like you to kind of speak to that misconception for those folks who think that growth isn't really necessary to accelerate their performance and to drive impact.
I'm kind of chuckling here as you ask that question because I'm from Chicago. And when I think about greatness, I think about the great Michael Jordan. But I chuckle because I was having a conversation with a younger generation last week and say Michael Jordan, and they scratched their head. And that was just mind-boggling to me because he just was everything for a guy from Chicago.
That's funny.
So you have to use, I guess, Kobe and some of the younger guys now these days. But Michael Jordan was the epitome of greatness, the top of his game. But even Michael Jordan recognized at a certain point, he could no longer drive to the hole and do the slam dunk that he was so well known for. Father Time caught up with him. And as he was aging, he had to add a new dimension to his game. A coach helped him realize that. So then he developed this amazing fadeaway that was just unblockable that extended his life a lot longer. So at every point in an executive's career, they need to make adjustments. In their case, Father Time is the time in the business cycle. quarterly performance, challenges from competitors that come up out of nowhere. There's always going to be something that makes an executive have a need to make an adjustment, have the ability to play above the rim, as it were. A coach is uniquely positioned to help a business executive to do that. So an executive coach works with that executive to help them maintain their competitive edge. The other thing I'd say is Marshall Goldsmith is someone who's often quoted in this space. He wrote a landmark book that's used. What got you here won't get you there. In other words, you can't rely on the same skill set.
Right.
As you climb the corporate ladder, as you go through different organizations, and in some cases of executives, go into different industries, you need to retool and develop a new skill set. I did some work at Harvard last year. I studied under world-renowned professor Ron Heifetz. Ron Heifetz says that at each of these levels, we need to develop something called adaptive leadership. We need to develop new capacity to handle challenges. And the issue is, in too many cases, individuals are applying technical solutions, right? Here's a specific prescribed way of handling something, to issues where really you shouldn't apply the same old thinking and tools. You need to apply adaptive leadership to it because it requires new skill set, because you're at a different level of new frontier of competency.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point. I mean, Les Brown talks about to get something you've never gotten, you've got to do something that you've never done. And if you keep looking for the same, for the next level of success in the same everyday habits, you're not going to find it, because if it's there, you would have found it already. So I think, your point is very well taken, that you now have to start to think about, how do you recreate? How do you repolish? How do you kind of redefine when you look at what your future is going to look like? So I really like how you said that in the book that you mentioned as well. I'll kind of paraphrase. One of the things that I would always say is that what got you through the door may not necessarily keep you in a room, and so I'm glad you kind of made that connection as well. So as we think about accelerating performance and driving impact, this really can be taken into your personal life as well. I mean, this just isn't for businesses, right?
Oh, absolutely, Chris. The International Coach Federation now uses the phrase personal development coaching. They no longer rely on the phrase life coaching. When you look at personal development coaching, individuals are interested in changing things in their career, but it often starts at home. What is my home life like? What is my personal life like? So interpersonal relationships with our loved ones, those closest to us, often matter. It's been said oftentimes, Chris, that behind every great man is an even better woman. So in our lives, we have that person that we love, our spouse or whoever it may be. And that person oftentimes is a great tool in helping us identify our shortcomings. And we're hearing it sometimes from that person, even before we're hearing it from those outside in our workplace or in our associations that we may have at professional associations. So definitely giving attention to all of those areas helps us in our business life.
And I think that one of the things too is it really helps you, I think, when those people who are closest to you are sharing that information, because it really teaches you, or it gives you that humility to say, I may need to recognize something I don't recognize in myself. So I'm really glad you brought that up. One of the things you said earlier, Eddie, was that you need to make sure that you have the mechanisms in place to help drive impact. What are some of those mechanisms?
Well, one of the things you mentioned is something I would concur with. Obviously, mentors, coaches, trusted advisors. Three things that we probably use interchangeably, those phrases, but they're wholly distinct people with different skill sets. So a mentor, someone who has done a particular role longer than we have, who can now guide us and allow us to have a case study example by watching them, learning from them in a particular role. A coach is an expert in the content, not the process. And this is what I often tell my clients. And so I don't have to have been a chief executive officer for a Fortune 500 company to be able to coach that individual, because I am skilled in the process of asking the right questions, giving active listening to and unearthing the best out of my clients, going through the coaching tools that I have gained as a certified coach. The content sits inside of that individual. And that is what I'm skilled at pulling out and allowing them to make the adjustments that they need. A trusted advisor is often perhaps a blend of the two. A trusted advisor sits in a step where they're not just an expert. This person is an expert and skilled, but they have the confidence of a senior executive, a senior leader, to give them unfettered, candid advice that they take and they act on. And they do it oftentimes as a coach, asking questions, but in other cases, they do it as a consultant or as a mentor where they're giving very specific advice, giving direction.
Yeah, and I think that, when you think about the experiences that we gain, and then we try to share those experiences, especially when it comes to mentorship, I see that there's two big flaws. And the first flaw is people don't recognize the need for the wisdom of a mentor, but secondarily, the people who could be mentors aren't stepping up and saying, let me help guide you through this process. And I think that in the absence of being able to recognize, in the absence of those people coming forward to say, let me help guide you, people really get lost. And when you think about, accelerating performance and driving impact, to get yourself to go from where you are today to the next level, you really need somebody to help guide you in that process, don't you think?
In many cases, yes. In other cases, it's understanding a little bit more about our own self and getting that example that sometimes may not exist in an existing corporation. And so, yes, I would agree on one aspect. Part of being a leader is not in necessarily what we are doing and how we're controlling a circumstance or an organization or group of people. In many cases, the old axiom is so true. It's what we leave behind. Did we produce a bunch of followers? Well, when we leave, the organization falls apart. Or did we create a whole new crop of leaders? And that is the best measurement, in my opinion, of what an effective leader does. They produce more leaders. And so in a mentoring relationship, in some cases, it's truly tactical and it's short term and it's designed to produce a person who is able to do the exact same thing the exact same way. And in other cases, it's about allowing a person to learn a little bit, but now explore, be innovative, and take that particular role to another level. So it depends on how that was done and how that was fostered. But it is so true.
One of the things that I noticed, as we prepare for our interviews, I went to your LinkedIn page and I, did a little research and, read your bios and things. And one of the things on there that I found very, very interesting was you have a little 90-second video that talks about how to use virtual technology to drive impact. Can you share a little bit about that with the audience?
So that is part of my work as a facilitator. So as a facilitator, I do face-to-face facilitation and strategy sessions, process mapping, and issue resolution for organizations. But one of the things I found that really allowed me to help individuals at all levels of an organization is to do that virtually. Doing that virtually allowed me to make a unique impact on several organizations. One organization, the CEO came to me and he said, Eddie, I am faced with reducing the most important meeting of the business down from 4 meetings a year to 2. That most important meeting is called the quarterly business review. Every corporation runs it. It is where the top executives get together and analyze the state of the business. So he said to me, I understand you might be able to help me. And so, Chris, that is one of the examples where I stepped in and was able to make an impact. I allowed a major Fortune 500 company to keep its executives, the top 30 executives, meeting. They had to reduce meeting face-to-face to 2 meetings a year because of the issues happening in the energy sector at that time. They couldn't afford to continue to meet face-to-face, fly everybody around the globe. But the other 2 were held virtually. And I used the power of facilitation virtually to make an impact. It made an impact because they felt like they didn't sacrifice. They felt like even though they weren't face-to-face, they weren't missing anything. For executives to tell me that was the highest compliment that I could receive, because that meant this wasn't just hey, we got a virtual session going and we're checked out. We're really not here. They felt involved. They felt engaged. They got the work of the company done. Billion-dollar decisions were still made. Changes were implemented. Things got done that would not have been able to get done at all or as easily because I was able to drive an impact.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important. The reason I brought that up, Eddie, and you hit exactly where I wanted you to go. I was thinking of a follow-up question, but I didn't need to do that because one of the things that, people will think that because you're in Chicago, because I come out of St. Louis, because this person's wherever they are, that they can't be engaged with because of that, not wanting to travel. But, the way that you put this in this answer and the way that it is on your LinkedIn page is that the value of this really could be anywhere. It could be face-to-face. It could be through online platforms. But now as we think about this generation that we're in, you can be just as successful, meaning as engaging with you, regardless of where you are in the United States or the world.
Absolutely. And in fact, in many cases, just generationally, to your point, most folks are demanding that there is a virtual component. I was working with an organization not long ago, and the president said, we're no longer doing virtual meetings. All meetings will be face-to-face. Wow. And so, of course, you bring in Eddie Turner, talk to the president, and the president made a change. And we showed that, hey, it's not that you get rid of the virtual meetings. It's the way the virtual meetings are being run. And so I showed solutions to run better meetings, demonstrated that. And now that organization is back to running both face-to-face and virtual meetings as necessary.
Well, I'm glad that we could hit on that because I think that is an important component, especially as we start to think about moving forward and growing to that next level. We need to use all the tools that we can to be successful. Well, I got to tell you, you've given us a lot of information already, Eddie, and I got to tell you, I've got a list of questions here that I don't know that we're even going to get to, and I'm going to probably try to entice you to come back and join us on a future show. But for the people who are out there that are listening to this and they're saying, you know what, I want to go ahead and think about accelerating performance. I want to go ahead and start to drive impact. Go ahead and talk to those people and give them the inspiration and motivation that they need to take those next steps.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you having me on your show. What an honor, again, to be on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I am an individual, as you mentioned earlier, who is a specialist and a deep generalist. So anyone who's looking to make a change in their career, I'd love to talk to them about really how I've done what I've done and how it can apply for them. At the end of the day, I help people. That's what I do. I do it in three primary ways, either one-on-one through executive coaching, career coaching, personal development coaching, or in groups, as we talked about with facilitation, the power of facilitation for large groups face-to-face or virtually. And out of those two things come good stories. So I give speeches. At the end of the day, either through coaching, facilitating, or speaking, my goal is to help people change, to help people and organizations become the next best version of themselves.
And I guess finally, Eddie, for those folks that do want to engage with you, what's the best way that they can contact you?
My website is www.eddieturnerllc.com.
And I got to tell you, that's really a great way to end this show. And Eddie Turner, I think that we've learned a lot from you, and I think we still have a lot more. And I'm going to try to entice you to come back and join us on a future episode to kind of continue this conversation. For taking time out of your day and sharing this, sir, thank you very much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And for everybody out there, when we think about this, and Eddie gave us some really great points today when we think about our professional development and how do we really get to that next level? How do we accelerate our performance? And how do we, drive impact? One of the things that you got to think about is this stuff doesn't happen by chance. You either wish it to happen or you actually will it to happen. So if you want to accelerate performance, you got to be able to find somebody. You got to be able to find those mentors. You got to be able to find those advisors, and you got to be able to take the step, take charge of your own professional development. I got to tell you, it's really great to visit with you. This is Chris Cebollero, and I look forward to chatting with you again real soon.
Thank you for joining us. The Ultimate Leadership Podcast is a production of chriscebollero.com. You can interact with us by email at ultimateleadership16@gmail.com. All rights reserved.